using the ORS, SRS and graphs to bring the feedback and voice of the young person and carer into CBT supervision. CORC and David Lowe have developed this video to be used in CORC Plus and CYP-IAPT training. This video clip shows an example which uses a CBT supervision session to illustrate how session-by-session measures and graphs as conversational tools to enhance client feedback and inform treatment can also be incorporated in clinical supervision to bring the feedback and voice of the young person and carer directly into the supervisory session in an effort to help support the effectiveness and efficiency of treatment. It is not intended to present perfect clinical or supervisory practice, but rather to stimulate discussion, i.e., how might you do it differently or better to fit your practice? The clinical scenario is loosely based on a real clinical example, and the names and all identifying information have all been altered to ensure confidentiality has been protected. Copyright is owned by CORC and David Lowe jointly, who both give permission for the video to be used in non-commercial training and CPD events. In this clip, Rebecca Light, CBT therapist, is presenting in supervision a case where she is using the Outcome Rating Scale, ORS, and Session Rating Scale, SRS, alongside the CBT model. The ORS and SRS are ultra-brief, reliable and valid measures designed to be used as a conversational clinical tool that enhances client feedback to inform treatment. In the USA and a growing number of European countries, the ORS and SRS have been designated an evidence-based practice, as the research has demonstrated that their use together improves outcomes while simultaneously decreasing the risk of dropout and deterioration in care. While the focus of this video clip is on CBT, the aim is to illustrate how the use of the ORS and SRS can be incorporated into the clinical work and supervision of all individual talk therapies with young people and carers. In this clinical scenario, Rebecca is using the ORS with a 16-year-old named Sarah to measure her level of distress and functioning and to track progress to ensure Sarah is benefiting from treatment. The ORS is for use with 13-year-olds up to adults. It has only 4 questions, which ask the client to rate how they perceive they have been doing over the last week by putting a mark on the 10 cm visual analog scale, where marks to the left are low levels and marks to the right are high levels. The ORS is scored and the score plotted on a graph to track progress in collaboration with clients. When therapists are doing individual therapy, they also need to incorporate a carer as a collateral scorer on how the young person is doing. There is also a version for younger children aged 6 to 12 called the CORS. In this clinical supervision scenario, Rebecca is bringing a case to supervision that she is concerned about and which to her feels stuck. After 8 sessions, the 16-year-old Sarah's ORS scores are indicating that she is not getting better and in fact might be a bit worse than at the start of therapy. Sarah's baseline score was just below the cutoff score for her age, and at the time of the supervision, her scores were a bit lower than the baseline score. The mother was not able to fill out the ORS to provide a collateral baseline score at the beginning of treatment. She was not able to fill out the ORS on her daughter until the 4th session. The mother's perceptions of her daughter's levels of distress and functioning placed her daughter over the cutoff score, indicating distress and functioning levels that would be consistent with other young people Sarah's age who do not seek treatment. This difference in perceptions adds to Rebecca's dilemma. In the case scenario Rebecca is presenting, she is also using the Session Rating Scale, SRS, at the end of each session to measure and track her therapeutic alliance with Sarah and with the mother when she attends. The SRS is a measure of the therapeutic alliance. Researchers have repeatedly found that the therapeutic alliance is one of the best predictors of outcome. Unfortunately, the research also demonstrates that clinicians, even those who ask for verbal feedback, are poor at gauging their clients' experience of the alliance. Rebecca discusses how she had been using the SRS as a clinical tool to enhance feedback on what she needs to do to adjust in her CBT approach from Sarah's point of view. Rebecca was feeling stuck, and despite using the feedback to tailor the CBT approach, Sarah's ORS scores were not improving. Supervision is a key mechanism for supporting supervisees' integration of feedback into their clinical practice. Supervisees should bring the client's ORS, CORS, and the SRS, CSRS and graphs to supervision. The measures and the graphs bring the feedback and voice of the young person and carer directly into the supervisory session, which is an invaluable addition to the clinician's perceptions of progress and the alliance. In this supervision session, you will see how Maria Loades, clinical psychologist, works out what Rebecca wants from supervision and then incorporates questions about the ORS and SRS scores to help Rebecca reflect on the young person and carer's differing views of progress and their perceptions of the quality of the therapeutic alliance they each have with Rebecca to facilitate Rebecca finding the solutions to her clinical dilemma. What is useful to note is that at no time does Maria attempt to therapy by proxy, i.e. explain or advise Rebecca what she should do. Throughout, she supports Rebecca's experiential learning by asking her questions that help Rebecca reflect on the case to develop a new understanding and plan of what to do. Also, notice that Maria uses the different subscales on the ORS to help make sense of the difference in perception about progress that Sarah and her mother have, i.e. Sarah is doing well in her relationships and her family, but she is struggling with peer relationships. Also notice how Maria does not invite Rebecca to use the scoring on the ORS as absolute and as a replacement of her clinical judgment.
So Rebecca, one of the clients you were keen to discuss today is Sarah. I was just wondering if you've got a specific question in mind that you were hoping for us to think about today.
Yeah, I guess my biggest question is whether to carry on with therapy or not, and if not, what to do with her, because I'm feeling a bit stuck. I think I've talked with you about her before. I don't know if you remember, but she's a young lady. She's 15 and she's experiencing low mood. I became involved initially through the school nurse because the school nurse had tried some things with her and felt that whilst she'd improved around her anxiety about being in classroom settings, she still was reporting feeling sad and upset quite a lot of the time, and she didn't seem to be making any headway with that, so invited me along, and I met with Sarah and her mum at home, and after the first appointment, it was clear that Sarah felt I hadn't really understood very well. So we spent some time on our own without Mum in the room because Sarah felt more comfortable that way.
Sure.
And things seemed to be sort of clearer in terms of my understanding of the problems. However, Sarah remained quite confused about the problem herself and also quite negative about how things were going. And over the course of time, we've had sort of various improvements and successes with things, but at the same time we've had some significant setbacks as well in her mood.
So what kind of therapeutic approach is it that you've been taking with her, Rebecca?
Mostly it is a CBT approach, really. Yeah, she's quite cognitively unaware, so she's telling me that she finds it hard to know what's making her upset. So we've focused a bit more since then on a bit more behavioural approach and sort of thinking about when does she feel better and what might be linked to that, and when does she first feel worse and what might be linked to that, and trying to draw up a formulation together. And that's the point where we keep getting stuck, is the sense that I think she is quite hopeless and feels that nothing could be helpful, and that's really been reflected in her outcome rating scale, but also with her session rating scale. So she keeps telling me that what we're doing isn't working, and each time I try and redress the balance with the things that she can manage to tell me about what's not working well, it seems that then there's something else that's not working well as well, and
and
I'm
so it shifts a bit.
Yeah. So, for example, she's told me that the session, she felt that we talked about the right things, but that my style didn't fit her. That's been quite. The approach sort of didn't fit. That's been quite persistently low, and so I've shifted my approach a number of times to try and counter that, and each time it still feels like it's not shifting. And I guess I'm wondering what might work for her, and how we can move that forward.
Sure. Have you brought the graph along?
Yes.
Shall we have a little look together?
Obviously, Mum didn't join us until the fourth session.
Right.
Consistently, Mum wasn't in the session. She came in a bit at the beginning and the end, but
Okay.
not for the main body of the session. So initially, Sarah was telling me that things weren't very good, but also that the session wasn't necessarily everything she'd hoped it to be. We made some changes, and I elicited quite a lot of feedback from her following that first session. And then the second session, she said she wanted me to tell her what to do more. So the second session, I remember I brought along quite a lot of self-help materials and information about depression, and she said that was more helpful because we had more of a focus to the session where she didn't have to talk much. So there was quite a lot more of me directing the session rather than asking her questions.
And she did rate that session as considerably better in
She
terms
did,
of alliance. Yeah.
Then the next session, we focused on reviewing how she'd got on with those psychoeducation materials. And so I was asking her quite a lot to feedback about how had she used that, how had she tried that, how had that helped or not. And she seemed to be telling me that me asking her questions was really unhelpful. And I guess I'm feeling really stuck because I'm unsure how any therapy might help.
Sure.
If she's reluctant to sort of have questions.
And it looks like that trajectory's kind of continued, that you've done several more sessions and started to include Mum in those, but for Sarah the patterns continued to be that she doesn't really feel the therapy is hitting the right mark, and that if anything her functioning on the ORS looks like it's kind of going downwards a bit. I'm quite interested in what you make of Mum's scores.
Well, I guess this is the bit that's really confusing me, is that Mum, and reportedly Mum said Dad as well, had both noticed an improvement in Sarah. They've both noticed that she's engaging herself more with the family, she's less tearful, she's responding to them in a less hostile way when she is a bit fragile, as Mum puts it. And yet she's reporting that things are not really any better. And so when I've tried to sort of ask her about that, I'm getting consistently for 8 sessions now lots of I don't knows, and she, to the point where she becomes quite resistant and without wanting to sound mean, a bit stroppy teenager, and defiant about even engaging with some of the thinking behind it. So it's been very challenging. But Mum, on the other hand, always seems quite optimistic that there's something I'm doing that's helpful, but she can't quite put her finger on what it is because Sarah's not able to say. And so Mum's quite hesitant for me to withdraw, given we've talked about this and sort of the idea that if things aren't improving by now, then maybe they won't. And Mum's quite resistant of me stopping because she sees improvements.
I mean, if we for a second took no note of Sarah's scores and just looked at Mum's functioning scores, if those were the functioning scores, and if we believe those just for a minute for the sake of the argument, what would you be thinking about?
I'd be thinking of discharging because she seems to be doing fairly well from Mum's reports.
And if we just look at Sarah's, you would be thinking of changing tack, or at least ending what you're doing because she's
trying something different. Yeah,
not getting
no change. Yeah.
Okay. That's quite interesting. Either way,
we might be thinking enough's enough of what we have been trying.
Certainly, yeah. Is there something you've explicitly shared with them in this version?
Yes, I have. Yeah, and I guess Mum is always comes back to. But if Sarah doesn't think it's if she's all right, then what do we do about that? And I guess that's the question I'm asking as well, is sort of what do we do if the young person's still telling us that things aren't okay, but the outside view is that she is doing better.
And it sounds like there's two parts to your question, if I'm hearing you right, Rebecca. The first one being, do we keep doing what we're doing now? And the second one being, well, what do we do?
Yeah.
So shall we deal with them one at a time? So what are you thinking about the first question? So do we keep doing what we're doing? If we fast forward, if you did another several sessions, let's say you did another 6 or 7 sessions like you've already done, do you think we would be anywhere different?
I don't think so. I think the answer to that has to be there isn't much point carrying on doing what we're doing because it's not making any change, and Sarah doesn't seem to be able to make use of it or isn't finding it the right thing.
And to come to the second question of, so where do we go next? Are there any cues that you've got from either the areas of difficulty on the ORS that keep coming up, or from what she keeps saying in terms of therapeutic alliance feedback on the SRS that would guide you in terms of which way to go?
I guess one of the things that she does say is that the only sort of true feedback I've had from her is about I want to be told what to do, and she seems to want to be directed in and that maybe suggests that a collaborative talking therapy isn't necessarily the right approach for her, and maybe she needs something a little bit more structured or that's led by the clinician, a bit more directive perhaps approach.
And on the ORS, can you remember which of the areas are the particular areas where she'll be scoring low?
For the ORS, it's peer relationships and her individual well-being.
Right.
Are the two that really pull it down.
Okay.
Yeah, family relations have always been fairly good, usually between an 8 or a 9, and overall is usually the usual average of lots of them. So, but yeah, typically peer relationships is a bit lower, and as is her individual sense of well-being.
So taken together, it seems like the ORS and SRS from Sarah indicating that maybe we need something more directive, more structured, but also something that maybe focuses more on relationships.
Yeah, that might be useful.
Would that be something that maybe you could consider? And
I could raise that with
her.
her, and I'd not thought of using the ORS as a way of helping her think about what could we focus on more. So that could be useful, because we focused on the sort of the feelings and the mood. Maybe it's more the area of functioning that we need to think about her moving forward with. So
I wonder if that also, you're saying it's particularly peer relationships and individual, which are the areas of difficulty for Sarah. I wonder if what your sense would be then of how there's the discrepancy between what Mum and Sarah are saying, and whether that helps you to make sense of that at all.
I'm sure it would. Yeah, I'm sure it would. I mean, I think if Mum's not seeing her in school and not seeing those peer relationships, maybe she's functioning better at home.
Yeah, so in the home context she might be functioning quite well, whilst she's feeling she's not functioning well in herself, and feeling she's not functioning well in that peer context.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So given our conversation today, our question was whether to carry on with therapy or not. Where have you got to?
I think it's not, but I guess it's that managing Mum's feeling of not wanting it to end because she's seeing improvements, and perhaps highlighting to her that for several weeks now Mum's seen that she's been better, and perhaps that's a good reason to end, as well as the fact that Sarah's not taking what she needs from the therapy, and put forward the idea of alternatives, but also the possibility that now just might not be the right time for Sarah. Yeah.
Great. Excellent.
Pause for a minute to reflect on the following questions. From watching this video clip, what has changed in your understanding of feedback-informed treatment? How might that new understanding make a difference in your role as supervisee and/or supervisor? What would you like to experiment with or do as a result of what you have learned?